Hey folks, welcome back to Railguns and Dragons. I am your host, the Evil Dungeon Master Vince. Today, we're going to be continuing our, New to Rift series Start Here. So far, we talked about Chaos Earth is the best place to begin, and I'm going to stick by that. And then we looked at the world before everything went wrong. Today, everything changes, not because of the war, and not because of aliens, and not because somebody invented a new weapon. Today, we're talking about something that nobody on Earth believed was actually real at all: magic. Now, if you've only ever played the main RIFTS game, it's easy to think magic has always been a part of the setting, and I understand that. And, there's wizards everywhere, ley line crisscrosses the planet, dragons are flying overhead, and demons are crawling out of people's dimension portals. It all feels, normal. Well, yeah, okay, that's normal for RIFTS, but that's really not how the story starts. For thousands of years, magic had faded from Earth. People still had myths about magic. They had the legends and the stories about Stonehenge and dragons and witches who can cast curses, and demons are not really real, but they are real, Modern humanity just kind of went meh and dismissed it. Science basically won. Technology explained everything. Even the old places of power, like, Stonehenge or the Bermuda Triangle, had become a little bit more than just basically tourist attractions at this point, or mysteries that nobody could quite explain, or, whatever. Whatever magical energy that had once existed became so weak that almost nobody even realized it was still there. So the world had simply just kind of moved on at this point. Then came December 22nd, 2098. Now, it's a long way away from us at this point, so we don't have to worry about it. Hopefully we never have to worry about it. But two nations exchanged nuclear weapons. By itself, that would have been another terrible chapter in human history. Except, those bombs detonated directly over the intersecting ley lines. That's not really good. Nobody knew those invisible rivers of magic even existed, or even knew what the ley lines really were, so. And nobody knew that every living thing carried some type of potential psychic energy, or PPE. Nobody realized that the instant a living creature dies, that energy is released with incredible force. Like, millions of people die almost instantly, and all that energy poured directly into the ley lines. What happened next wasn't just, a normal explosion. It was like a chain reaction. One ley line ignited another, and in less than 3 minutes, magical energy raced around the entire planet. Humanity hadn't rediscovered magic, it had accidentally just detonated a bomb of magic. Now, one of my favorite ideas or things about Chaos Earth is that nobody knows what's happening. I'm going to pause and let you think about that for a minute, okay? So imagine you're a soldier stationed outside Chicago, for example. 1 minute, your radio's working, you're chilling, you're having a smoke, having a drink, and next thing you know, they're full of static, and the sky's starting to change colors, and the ground begins to glow, and strange storms appear out of nowhere. Then people start doing impossible things. Maybe someone in your squad suddenly can heal a wound by touching another person. Another soldier starts hearing voices from miles away, and no, they're not going crazy. Somebody else accidentally hurls a truck across the street without ever really even laying a hand on it. Nobody has words for any of this. Nobody says, "Oh, he's just a mind melter." Those classes, or those terms, I should say, don't exist yet. Nobody say, "Oh, that's a ley line walker." They don't know what the hell that is. Those don't exist as of right now. They're only frightened people just kind of surviving in the world that stopped making sense overnight. And then the creatures came. One of the biggest misconceptions new players have is thinking monsters invading Earth because the dimensional rifts opened. Well, I mean, that's kind of right, but that's only part of the story. Magic itself began changing the world. Animals mutated, like ancient creatures that had been dormant for thousands of years just kind of woke up. Went, wow, what's going on here? Ooh, look at this. Places that have been ordinary yesterday suddenly became like these supernatural weird hotspots. Then the rifts themselves exploded open. Every dimension connected to Earth suddenly had now a doorway. Ding dong, we're home. Some of those visitors were, curious. Some wanted to explore because it was something new and fascinating. But many of those visitors were like, now I can conquer something new. And others just wanted to feed on whatever's through the door. Imagine watching the evening news one night and seeing reports of dragons flying over mountains, and you look twice and you're like, wait a minute, am I watching a trailer for a movie? No, wait, this is not a hoax. These are real dragons. Meanwhile, other cities report actual demons walking through downtown. Others claim giant monsters have appeared in the countryside. Another, just kind of loses contact entirely. The governments of Earth had spent centuries preparing for conventional wars. Nobody had prepared for mythology becoming tomorrow's headlines. They didn't say, oh, this is not a problem. We bought out the book from protocol on defeating dragons. No, they had nothing for that. They had no prep for dragons because they didn't think dragons existed. And that's really the genius of Chaos Earth. It doesn't ask like the what if magic returned, it asks a much more terrifying question. What if magic returned? And absolutely nobody had the vocabulary to understand what they were looking at. Like every decision leaders made were based on science and military doctrine. Even emergency responses, every plan, none of it worked anymore because it didn't apply to all these weird situations. Humanity wasn't just about to lose a war, it was trying to understand the rules of the universe that had completely changed overnight. And the one thing that I think that Kevin and Palladium absolutely nailed was how ordinary people would react to it. Today, if someone walked into a room and threw a fireball, we'd probably assume, some type of trick or CGI or, it's Chris Angel or something. Or maybe some type of classified military technology. Nobody's first thought would be, wizard? Well, if you play role-playing games and a guy walked into a room and hurled a fireball, you probably would think wizard, but not everybody's a role-playing guy, or girl, or gal, whatever. So the people of Chaos Earth weren't really any different than the normal average person. When magic first appeared, they tried to explain using the only tools they had. So scientists started looking for radiation, and doctors were assuming it was some type of new disease, and that's the only thing they can classify it as. Military commanders, on the other hand, assumed it was some type of super weapon that it was, classified. And what else? And the religious leaders saw it's a prophecy. That's what they always see. And the conspiracy theorists, well, they probably thought they were finally right about something, right? Everyone was trying to explain the impossible using yesterday's understanding of the world, and while all that confusion was happening, magic is growing. It's getting stronger and better and faster. Wait, that's a $6 million man. Never mind. This is another detail that often kind of gets overlooked. Magic didn't simply just, turn on like flipping a light switch. The ley lines were overflowing with energy. The earth itself was basically had changed. Suddenly there were places where magical energy was so concentrated that strange things happened by just standing there. And you could tell animals were avoiding these places, and electronic equipment just started malfunctioning in the area. People were reporting seeing lights dancing across the landscape. Ghostly figures start appearing, voices, strange weather. Nobody knew what these glowing rivers of power were called They were eventually, obviously, were called ley lines, but they didn't know what they were called yet because they didn't know what the hell they were. They were simply places nobody wanted to visit. They just kind of didn't want to go there because they didn't know what the hell it was. Until someone finally did. So imagine being like the first curious teenager who walks towards one of these glowing lines that they see in the middle of the air or the ground, or the first military reconnaissance team ordered to investigate, or maybe like a scientist trying to take measurements. You don't know what you're standing on or going towards, or you don't know you're standing on one of the greatest sources of magical power possibly on the planet, right? You just know, reality feels different. And that, there's something I really love here, and magic doesn't replace technology. It kind of collides and clashes with it. And that is one of the biggest themes running through all rifts. Your tank still works, your rifle fires, your satellites, well, maybe not for too long. But technology isn't suddenly useless. Instead, humanity finds itself fighting enemies that don't really give a crap about technology at this point. And it has you asking a question: how do you stop a dragon with a military doctrine? How do you negotiate with something that's been alive for like 10,000 years? And I don't know, how do you deal with a demon who's like, I don't give a crap what your borders are? Nema could plan for invasions. They could plan for disasters. They could even plan for nuclear war. But they couldn't write a field manual titled, What to Do If an Ancient Sorcerer Levels a City in One Block of Destruction. There's no military academy at this point that prepares you for that, and there's no emergency response handbook chapter called, If the Sky Tears Open, This is What You Do. No. That's why Chaos Earth feels really different, and it's a great starting point and a great change from a typical apocalyptic setting. Like, the zombies aren't the problem, or the aliens aren't the problem. And honestly, magic really isn't even the problem. The problem is that civilization loses confidence in its own understanding of reality. And once that happens, everything else just kind of falls apart on you. One question I've been asked over the years about Chaos Earth is, if magic came back, why isn't everyone just casting spells? And, that's kind of a fair question. The answer is because magic is a lot like electricity. Just because electricity exists doesn't mean everybody can build a power plant or harness that magic. Magic returns to the world, but understanding how it works, that was something entirely different. Think about the first generation after the Great Cataclysm. There were no schools of magic or universities or spellbooks sitting on library shelves. No internet explaining how to cast your first spell. The people who survived were making discoveries one terrifying mistake at a time. Some individuals discovered they had incredible natural talents by themselves. Others never developed any magical ability at all. Some accidentally opened doors they had no business opening as well. Others awakened psychic powers instead. Remember, in Rifts, psychic abilities and magic aren't the same thing. Not even close. Both exploded back into the world after the Cataclysm. But they followed different rules. And that's another thing I always appreciated. Palladium could have taken the easy route and magic users, psychics, whatever, same thing. Instead, Kevin and team at Palladium made them distinct. Some people manipulated magical energy, others unlocked incredible powers with their mind. And while both could seem to be miraculous to ordinary people, they were completely different disciplines entirely. So imagine, you're one of these survivors. Your neighbor can, suddenly, move objects without touching them. And your daughter suddenly looks at you and knows what you're thinking before you even speak to her. Yes, I want ice cream. I didn't ask you. Well, I heard it. Meanwhile, the old man in the next town is drawing these strange symbols on the ground, and somehow it creates an actual fire. I don't know. From the outside, it all looks like magic, but even the people using the abilities don't really fully understand what's happening at this point. And they're basically pioneers of the whole situation. They're not masters. I think that's something we kind of lose sight of because most stories begin after the world has already adapted and collapsed and moved forward. And Chaos Earth, and while I constantly say is a perfect place to start for Rifts, Chaos Earth isn't really that story. Chaos Earth is humanity's first day in a universe where the impossible has become an ordinary event. No one has names for all these things that are happening yet. Nobody knows which things are safe, and nobody knows what happens if you just push a little too far. And they always say discovery and knowledge come with a price. Every success creates 10 new questions on top of the original. And that's exactly what I think makes this era so fascinating to me. You're not reading about like legendary archmages, you're watching the very first people stumble to becoming into these things. Some will become like heroes for the lands, and some will become monsters. Criminals, heroes, whatever, not criminals and, bad guys, whatever. And, some probably won't survive long enough to understand what even happened to them. Because with magic, it doesn't care if you're ready, it just simply returned, and humanity has to pretty much catch up with what is going on. And that's really where Chaos Earth earns its place as a perfect introduction. I'll say it over and over again, yeah. Because once you understand how magic returned, everything else kind of just makes a little bit more sense. Why are there dragons on Earth? Because the dimensional barriers fell. Why are there demons? Well, same answer. Why do ley lines crisscross the planet? Well, I don't know, because they were always there. You just never really noticed them. Humanity basically just forgot about them and just stopped noticing them. Why are psychics kind of just everywhere? Because the energy released during the Great Cataclysm awakened these abilities that had been dormant for these generations. Even mega damage, in a sense, starts to make more sense. The world itself has pretty much changed. The rules have changed. Reality's changed. That's something I really appreciate about the setting. Rifts never really says, here's a fantasy world. It says, this is your world. Then it shows you exactly how your world became the place where dragons fly over abandoned skyscrapers and power armor battles ancient sorcerers. It's all science fiction, it's all fantasy, it's all horror, it's basically post-apocalyptic. Somehow, after throwing all that stuff in the soup, it all works. And I think that's because Kevin Sambidia didn't simply throw ideas into a blender. He built, I want to say, a chain of events. One thing led to another. Magic is here. These rifts open. Civilization collapses overnight. New civilizations rise, technology survives, but magic grows stronger alongside of it. The Earth becomes the crossroads of the Megaverse. That's why if you're brand new to Rifts, I'm gonna always recommend starting here. Not because Chaos Earth is a smaller book, and not because it's simpler to digest, but because it's a little bit more familiar if it's your first time into Rifts. You kind of know the world, you understand the governments and the military and the cities, the technology, and then you watch every one of these certainties just kind of disappear. And because you experience that transformation, the main Rift setting doesn't feel random and weird anymore. Well, it's going to always feel weird, but it feels like history, right? You understand why people fear magic. You understand why ancient knowledge suddenly now has value. And you understand why survivors cling to old technology. You will start to understand why entire nations are trying to rebuild from ashes. You lived through the moment everything changed. Now that's something players who jump straight into the year 109 PA never really get to experience. they get to see the destination. Chaos Earth lets you witness the journey to that destination. And that's why I believe this makes it such a great, rewarding read and play. The best origin stories don't always answer every question. They leave you wanting more. And that's exactly what this Chaos Earth setting does. It ends with humanity standing at the edge of a completely different age. Nobody knows what the next century will look like, and nobody knows who will survive or what new civilizations will rise from the ruins. But one thing is definitely certain. The age of science is over, and the age of magic has just begun. That's where I'm going to leave it for today. We've watched a world built on science collide with something it couldn't explain. Magic wasn't a new invention, it wasn't a secret weapon, it was a force that had always existed, like waiting for the right moment to awaken. When that moment came, it just didn't change the battlefield, it changed humanity's understanding of reality itself. That's what makes Chaos Earth such a compelling place to begin your journey in Rifts. You're not dropping into a world where dragons and wizards have already existed for a while, and you get to witness the exact moment they become real. You see civilizations struggle to adapt, you see ordinary people become extraordinary, and you see the first steps towards the incredible, dangerous, and wonderfully strange world of Rifts that it eventually does become. So next time in our New to Rifts Start Here series, I'm going to shift the focus a little bit from magic to the people trying to save the civilization. Thinking maybe I'll talk about NEMA, which is the National Emergency Military Alliance, who they were, why they mattered, and why their legacy echoes through the entire Rift setting long after Chaos Earth comes to an end. So if you've been enjoying this series, I appreciate if you follow the podcast, listen, wherever you listen to it, give us a rating. It really does help other Rifts fans and Palladium fans discover the show. If you're looking for more content, go ahead to railgunsanddragons.com, where you'll find links to the podcast, the YouTube channel, and plenty of other tabletop gaming content. This podcast is going to shift its focus a little bit. I said originally when it was Reborn, it was only going to do Rifts. I'm thinking about adding in some of the other settings into this podcast, like Robotech, Nightbane. Everything will be labeled appropriately when you see it uploaded, so there'll be no confusion. And if you don't want to listen to a certain episode, you can always skip that, and you don't have to worry about it being an episode that, oh no, I'm going to miss something, because this will be episodical, I believe it's called, so don't worry about it. If you see something that you enjoy when the title comes out, oh, that's interesting, that's about Rift, so, oh, that's about Palladium Fantasy, I want to listen to that, then you can listen to that and enjoy. If not, then, whatever. So keep it original, keep it old school night, and I want to say God bless everybody. You've been listening to Railguns and Dragons Reborn, a podcast about Rifts. Head over to railgunsanddragons.com for more information.